got bad news and good news for you Heroes fans. The bad news is there's only one series left for HGC this weekend. But the good news is it is a great one. Team 8 versus Tempo Storm.
It's got to be, probably the best of the weekend, at least for the North American side of things, because we have the #1 and #2 going head-to-head. Team 8 trying to prove, that the GFE series was just a bit of a fluke.
Absolutely, and Tempo Storm wants to ride off of the high of defeating No Tomorrow, especially the great No Tomorrow that we saw in the last series as well, 3-0.
Yeah, it was a very dominant performance for Tempo Storm, which is why we said it was so hard to gauge how good is this new version of No Tomorrow, but they did reign supreme over Naventic, but now it's just, it's going to be, I'm excited. That's all I can say about this series. Is I think it's going to be very action-packed, very competitive games.
I am super pumped too. Before we get into it though, we should take a look at the standings after the victory of No Tomorrow. Things look relatively the same, and that's because Team Naventic were able to get a victory over B-Step. So both the teams still sitting in the exact same places, just upping each of the numbers up one more, 2-7 and 2-7. So both of those teams will continue to fight their way out of these bottom 2 spots. The bottom 2 spots at the end of Part 2 are this teams who will be going into the Crucible, potentially losing their spots here in HGC to an open division team.
And the reason why this at the top Tempo Storm and Team 8, this series is so very important is because, again, looking at the mid-season brawl, the fact that we do have the #1 team of the region will be secured 100% to go, whereas the others will have to fight through the playoffs, and that is not something that you want to have happen. So it's very important that Tempo Storm comes out on top, especially because Tempo Storm beat Team 8 in the last part. If Tempo Storm does that again, any head-to-head to compare on who will win, Tempo Storm will always win that because, again, they've won in both matches against one another.
Counting the Western Clash, Tempo Storm and Team 8 are 1-1 in series versus each other, both of those series going all the way to game number 5. Let's get some insight into what these teams' players are thinking about this match.
Honestly, Tempo Storm is an interesting team for us. They're one of our primary practice partners, and in HGC, I would like to be first seed, but my team is really young. We still don't know how strong we are or can be, but I'd say based off of how we did in Part 1 of Phase 1 of HGC, I'd say there's a good chance we could beat Tempo in our next show.
Team 8 was definitely the most surprising team. I think everyone thought that they were going to be a bottom of the barrel, but they're second seed. So I think that as HGC goes on, they're going to have to rely less and less on Glau, and the other 4 need to be able to step up their own game.
Team 8 talked about it. Tempo Storm are one of their primary practice partners, but with the long break, so were Gale Force Esports. And knowing that they were going to be up against both Gale Force Esports and Tempo Storm, that limited the scrim options for Team 8, which they feel really hurt them in the series versus Gale Force.
But if you want to be one of the best in North America, you've got to find other ways to get that practice because it's going to happen. Every team is going to experience a week where they don't feel they got the practice they deserved, or at least that they wanted. And if you truly want to stay at the top of a region for a long period of time, stuff like that can't set you back.
Now, we mentioned that Tempo Storm did win 3-0 over No Tomorrow. However, there were some potential holes that No Tomorrow started to root out. Things like forcing some deaths, or even if not deaths, heroic abilities. Cattle even talked about in the interview. We had a team fight comp, or we didn't have a team fight comp, and we didn't want to fight, and yet we kept doing it.
Yeah, but that's kind of what we've known of Tempo Storm since they rose to the top of North America. They go in with the game plan. If it doesn't work, then sometimes things can really begin to crumble relatively quickly for that group. Even though they are the top of North America, there are some, holes in their game plan.
We'll see if Team 8 can exploit those holes. Let's check out the Battleground pool for HGC. And game number 1, picked by Tempo Storm, Dragonshire.
Back. It's coming back. The Dragonshire, slowly becoming more and more popular in North America. I love it.
It's not just a No Tomorrow pick. We've seen several other teams choose Dragonshire now and add Tempo Storm to that list. Check mark box.
Got him.
And here we go. Draft number 1, game number 1. So important, as was the last series. We knew today was going to be fantastic. and Aventic and No Tomorrow delivered, I have no doubt that Tempo Storm and Teammate will do the same.
Teammate with the Zarya, Tempo with the expected Tassadar. As always, no hesitation there. So where is Teammate going to move in the first pick? Do they want the Arthas? They showed they were comfortable first picking Arthas, but that was on Inferno. When it comes to more lane-oriented maps, it seems like their focus is onto the Mouth. And the Gul'dan that we saw on Braxis, they pick up the Mouth here. Tempo Storm, though, we do have data on them on Dragonshire in Part 2. Dahaka was a heavy part of their focus, and they can pick up Falset, too. The double global play would be really safe.
It was also the place where Tempo Storm ended up drafting Kael'thas later on. So something to keep in mind as we move through the draft, especially for Teammate.
An insane fluctuation in priority once more coming out from these teams. Malfurion, Tychus, Dahaka were the primary focus for the first 3 picks last time that we saw Tempo Storm here, but now going with the Arthas, Tychus, putting more focus into their 4-man.
Where do Team 8 take this now? How much comfort stays for them? That's my big question.
I mean, you have to, my first thought is you got to go with putting Glorong on the Dahaka, put him up in the top, right? We know that Glorong's hero pool is something you always have to consider when looking at Team 8. And how successful they're going to be. I would really enjoy if they went in that direction here early on, made a global power play, look to get a ban in the later ban phase. They go with the Zeratul instead, but still the global.
Yeah, Zeratul Falstad, still getting Glau's hero.
Puts a lot of focus on trying to gank up on top. That makes, in my opinion, because you pick the Falstad, and because Dahaka is one of the hardest solos to gank, it's a must ban on the side of Teammate now. Anubarak is still up and can be represented in a solo lane, as we have showed recently, with the Beta Barbs moving on to 4. Originally, Anubarak was a solo laner, but he fell out after a lot of nerfs. And now bringing the Beta Barbs back early on, it helps with his wave clear quite a bit, helps with his solo laning significantly.
So we saw a lot of Varian from Justing versus Galeforce Esports, and as we've talked about, Varian is not doing super well. That is what Galeforce did versus Teammate 2. Continued ban on ETC.
I mean, Tempo Storm and Galeforce were scrim partners, so they're going to have more identical thought processes.
It's interesting to see it there. My question is it their thought on ETC, or is it their feelings toward Justing? I can't separate it.
I struggle with it as well. I would say it's Justing. It's a target on Justing more than it is anything else. That, excuse me, the impact he has on that hero is just so high that you cannot let him have it, really. Even after the nerfs, apparently.
Yeah, it's less of a hero pool ban because we know Justing plays so much. Just the amount of warriors that we saw in Part 1. So it's way more about this respect ban, which should garner some good feelings from
Rhaegar
Justing.
and Murden. I am just amazed at the lack of priority onto the top, especially with we've seen that in the past. The 4-man of Tempo is just insane. Murden Arthas, always hot, always love those two together as the double warrior. Tychus is a really solid pick across the board. Opting towards the Rhaegar after Lucio ban, no surprise there as well. So Tempo Storm is saving that top lane for the very last pick, but again, Teammate now has the option to choose who they want there. They can still put Zeratul there as a placeholder. Falstad can be there as kind of a, placeholder as well. But none of them are, the wreaking havoc solo laners that we traditionally know. And I think No Tomorrow just put on a really good example on why it's important to focus those a lot of the times. Their solos were very successful, and Aventic drafted just placeholders that you would have to baby temporarily, and eventually that really began to hurt them. It doesn't right out the gates, but as you get about 7 to 10 threshold, there's usually about a 3/4 to half level advantage to the team that commits.
Yeah, it's just what are you willing to draw resources from in order to have more resources later on or in other places. Johanna and Azebo. So Johanna pick helps with wave clear in the back and forth of mid to bot on Dragonshire. Strong frontliner, has her own sort of cleanse. Nazebo into the late game, also has some lockdown, but we've seen a lot of Nazebo picks that will sit bottom lane, and that allows for a lot more rotations because you can stall out waves. So it might be that Team 8 is just going to be very, very fluid throughout their movements.
What does Tempo Storm want as this last pick? Do they go into the KT? They can go Kel'Thas still, which we saw them already feel comfortable running. It's a skill matchup into the Zeratul specifically, especially with Mana Addict. It's going to be the Kel'Thas. Again, sacrificing the top, only having the option to put Arthas into that solo lane. Tychus as well, but again, more of a placeholder. But with no focus on a solo coming out of Team 8, Arthas is by far the most dominant in the solo lane.
Twice now. More than twice, actually. 3 times Tempo Storm is favoring having Kel'Thas and super stun lock compositions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's insanely powerful. We saw just even from No Tomorrow before, whenever they are actually landing the skill shots properly, it's very hard to stop it.
That's true. They just need to make sure, they being Tempo Storm, that they don't get caught out again with the early rotation, because they had to work their way back. They weren't able to come right out of the gates, 1 minute or even less in, and be able to start getting kills on Team 8.
Yeah, and that has, with the Zeratul, knowing that Glaurung is going to be on that hero, it's going to be that much more pressure onto Psalm, which when we saw him playing Kel'Thas, he was the #1 person to get picked out on Tempo Storm. So that does give me a bit of hope when looking at the draft of Team 8, but it does feel like, again, they are more looking towards how can we build comps around Glaurung, and historically, any team that it gets to the point where it starts building around, Glaurung's hero pool is when they start to get their weakest.
Tempo Storm said they felt really confident. They wanted to make sure that they cleared up their early game 2, especially after the series versus No Tomorrow. But still, especially seeing, how Team 8 performed versus Gale Force Esports, feeling pretty confident about this. So let's see how this match is going to be. We've got Tempo Storm versus Team 8, and we're headed into game #1 on Dragonshire.
Here on the left-hand side is your #1 seed for North America. The legend himself, June, is going to be on the Rhaegar Fury on the front line, playing the Muradin. Tychus is going to be played by Cotton Luck, a comfort there for him. Psalm on the Kel'Thas, what seems like a new comfort, more of a favorite, and Caterpillar flexing it out on the Arthas.
Come back to that in a second, but meanwhile, Team 8 in the red. Buds playing Malfurion, stand out new support player. Justin playing Johanna. Yoda will be playing Nazebo. Up next, Glaurung playing Zeratul, and finally Prismaticism on one of his comforts, Falstad.
So what you wanted to talk about is the fact that Fury played Arthas every time that we saw Tempo Storm play Arthas before, but now they have Caterpillar flexing on the Arthas.
Get out of my brain.
And letting Muradin be played by Fury himself.
It seems to me that guarantees that we're looking at Arthas being the top lane.
Yes, which again, it makes sense looking at the comp. You see Glaurung kind of anchoring, looking for a poor full rotation from anybody, but Cattle heads up there, making the smart rotation.
That's a constant,
got him.
Fear that he'll have to have, at least recognizing that he has to adjust his laning play to compensate the fact.
But the composition, okay, because there is no solo top that thrives, so typically we know Dragonshire Zeratuls, they always want to be ganking top because that's really unrealistic that they're going to be effective in ganking into the 4-man rotations. Tempo Storm is very, very good with their comp into 4-man rotations. As you can see, they delete minion waves pretty quickly. So that means now their Zeratul has to camp top. And if you're going to do that, you typically want a traditional top laner, not one that's going to actually lose into Arthas in the long run. It won't, post-4 it's going to be a little bit different, but the original matchup, Arthas bodied Falstad. Now I think it's a bit different with hammer gains, but you can just poke in the long run with your Q. And see, Cattle doesn't even have to question where Glaurung is going to be, purely based on the draft on the side of Team 8. And these are the things that add up at the professional level, especially at the top of North America.
Right, because every time Cattle sees a Zeratul, the 4-man can get uber aggressive for Tempo Storm. Maybe a Team 8 starts taking out towers in one lane, but it's top, the least impactful. And meanwhile, Tempo Storm have everything else going in the mid and bot, but Justine can stall out some waves to some effect. Nazebo can stall out some waves to some effect.
And I think this is the exact reason why, especially my conversation about the Dehaka being so confused at the lack of priority of solo lanes that it seems like North America is developing is purely just based on this right here. It's like now your rotations, how you have to play the video game, is so predictable that you no longer are really effective until post-10 raw team fighting. And at that point, on Dragonshire especially, you are so far behind that it really doesn't matter. I don't care what hero you're on. I should be a level to an entire talent tier ahead. Gravity Lapse combo comes out. Buds is going to die, being the second kill of the game. Johanna was picked earlier, so not totally first blood. But Temple Storm here has full control on this game.
Yeah, a lot of aggression, a lot of pressure so early in the game, 3 minutes in. Some interesting talent choices while we maybe have a second. Wingman for Falstad.
Yeah, that was based on the fact that he's going to be the solo. And just wanting to get Bride pressure, it makes a lot of sense because Dragonshire is very, once the Dragon Knight's down, very Merc focused. But it will hurt the damage potential for sure, especially, you know, in the later halves of the game, not going that season mark. McLaurin gets sniffed out. Beautiful Stormbolt, not blind, but more, you know, predicting while somebody is stealth in the direction they're going to move is very difficult.
On Arthas, the build we are coming to know as the solo laner Arthas build, focusing more on getting Death Lord, Death Coil talents. We'll see if Syndragosa is the heroic ability of choice. Justin wants to stall this out, but is taking a lot of damage from Cawthon before realizing that bottom lane would be taken over momentarily for Team 8, but it's a blip of time before Tempo Storm goes right back in. Just constant pressure. Cawthon's here. Fury turns around. Such a bait.
Justin has got a lot of damage. Glaring should be there to be able to body block off. And he will try and be able to get that peel. Arthas questioning if he should collapse down there. Cattle now is going to get flanked. No damage output yet onto him. Seeker in the dark not landing. Again, just getting a dismount, being a pain in the butt. And this is the reaping the rewards of the lack of focus onto the top lane. Temple Storm getting full value into their 4-man, getting so much pressure on bottom. And there's nothing Team 8 can do. And again, this all started in the draft.
Even Tempo Storm feeling so confident as to get the bruisers in the bottom lane.
It's insane the amount of control. Tempo Storm has gotten 3 Merc camps in a Dragon Knight phase and has not once questioned if they were going to lose in Dragon Knight. That is ludicrous to see that happen on Dragonshire. That is absolutely unheard of. And again, merely off the predictability of the draft and rotations forced.
Cawthon look picked in the rhythm.
Going with In the Rhythm into a solo warrior. Interesting choice to find that. Typically into a solo warrior even before the nerfs that came to In the Rhythm indirectly with the lack of healing later. It'll help his damage output overall. It's just going to draw a bit more resources, you know, from the old school Tychus to modern day Tychus from June. But I mean, when you got a support like that backing you up, you probably feel comfortable taking risks.
Some risks? I would say so. Not full Lightning Rod build for Prismaticism, just Bribe at level 1. Wingman Glaurum is going to choose to dive into Cattle. But again, the sustainability of the Death Coil build, the fact that Cattle is a tank, he's going to be fine. It's going to get some help from Fury to clear out this mercenary camp.
That was actually, the Gravity Lapse lands. A lot of damage on that trade. Now Glaurum have to teleport out. So one argument for the Bribe that we see out of Falstad that we were talking about, the Wingman, was about the late game, the cycling of the pressure. But one thing it can do, since they didn't draft a top laner, what we saw was the moving into Mercs, getting the Mercs camp for free and not buying a lot of time. So it is going to help the lack of solo, and it did. But, you know, is that worth the trade-off of lack of team fighting damage in the back half of the game? We'll guess. Well, I'm going to say no, but we'll find out. First Dragon Knight here going over to Temple Storm. Still really yet to see a moment for Team 8 to even get a pick, any kind of minor play. 6 minutes in here on Dragonshire.
And for reference, that wall went down so fast. And it's, again, thanks to the constant rotations, the constant damage that Tempo Storm has elicited in both of these lanes. Now we've got Giants and the Dragon Knight starting to put his teeth, sink his teeth into the fort and bottom. We will have the first fort going down with this Dragon Knight.
Yeah, that's going to be about all she can get. At most, maybe mid, but with 20 seconds remaining, it'll be more of just, you know, throwing some fire out, getting a bit of poke out there. Now, Team 8, their comp is come online. They're post-10. They're in a situation to get the team fighting. But what I was talking about with Dragonshire, much like we know on very lane-centric maps, is that you get crippled on your ability to get to choose those fights. You are more volunteering to the advantage of your opponents, and you never can really be like, oh, we'll catch them here, we'll catch them there, because again, there's so much pressure going into the lanes, and there is no blank spot to enter like you can see on newer maps that are released into the game, where you can enter without moving through a minion wave.
Yeah. Justin's considering Falling Sword.
I don't know how. I love actually, I like Falling Sword. I just don't know if this is a scenario, because you have to kill Kalthos. That is, they're banking on all-inning KT after a Void. So you Void, you Falling Sword, you hover over, you
Just
drop.
other people away, Twilight Dream.
If you were gonna do that, shouldn't you just take Hinterlands? If you're gonna, if that's the strategy, right? That's my first thought. Is if you're really truly were going in for the one-hit wonder wombo, Hinterlands makes a bit more sense, especially in modern day, since the buffs. You can bank on hitting as many people were in the initial Void coming up from Glarong, and that the Falling Sword does do a lot of damage. Mana Addict complete means that now Psalm is going to be able to skirmish into Glarong significantly better. Now, 13 and Mana Addict, when you're a Kalthos, you're online. Like you're ready to battle anyone and everyone. You're feeling good.
And that makes it that much harder for some sort of Kalthos execution to happen. Was not Syndragosa, Caterpillar going for the safe option of Army of the Dead. That's the stuff returns along with In the Rhythm. This is the first time we are seeing a Tychus return to this after That's the Stuff was nerfed.
We'll see how it works out. How it works different than before is originally you would get the healing directly after stacking with the In the Rhythm, increases the duration of your passive the longer you get auto attacks. But now what happens is you don't get healed as you're doing the damage output. It's now you're only healed after your passive is completed. Meaning that if you get your In the Rhythm stacks really high, like 3, 4, 5 seconds, and you really need the heal out of that 13 talent, you legitimately have to stop DPSing and stop getting value out of your passive. Which is why the argument of, you know, this is why we go the bigger they are, because then it's very fast, instant burst, and you never have to worry about not doing the damage directly. So we'll see if it works out. We'll keep track if at any point an old school Tychus would have been able to survive versus modern day not making it out. Falling Sword's the choice.
Yep, Justin is committed to diving the backline versus having Blessed Shield. Tempo Storm continues to just throttle the bottom lane structures now. Towers are down, gate is open, keep exposed. Falstad and Bruisers still pressuring the top lane, so Tempo Storm feels comfortable going in, especially as they drop Odin.
I love to see this pressure on the map in between the map objective, you know, understanding the misplays of your opponents, realizing your compositional strengths. KT and Tychus are great. They gave up a Dragon Knight, but really, what does that cost you this early on? There's going to be the Void combo.
But
sadly, no Falling Sword to join.
He has the roots there, but did not move in even further for Twilight Dream. So far, Tempo Storm are backing on out. Justin has brought the Dragon Knight back for the defense. Tempo Storm are fine with that.
So what I would have liked to see out of Teammate there, because this is identical to what we saw in the last game. When a team gets a mid-tier Dragon Knight sitting in the 8 to 10 minute range where it's not doing enough auto attack damage to justify team fighting with, when they backdoored that bottom channel, rather than actually capturing it for Justin, just rotating down, looking to get the fight. And then if you win, you've got both shrines, you're fighting near a shrine, and it's more likely for you to get the DK. But instead, they get the DK. They did pull off of the keep on bottom, but they would have been more successful in the fight, and now they really aren't going to be able to net much out of this Dragon Knight.
Yeah, especially with that health bar starting to fall. Still got Cawthon here to work on that. Arthur Steele's with the pressure on top. There was a fort taken out for Teammate, and that has helped them climb back in the experience game. They're only slightly behind Tempo Storm and getting 16 talent tier. But even still, it feels like only a momentary lapse in the aggression that Tempo Storm has put out in these lanes.
16 is up. Tempo Storm is going to achieve it as well. Oh, Johanna. Justin drops the Falling Sword. Not the direction you usually like pressing your R button, but it will get the job done here. Justin is going to be fine.
Fury of the Sunwell. A lot more damage potential for some.
And now that makes their sieging that much better. So now they're going to set their focus on that very, very weak keep on bottom. Ooh, scared a bit. Wingman's getting value there. He's going to steal the Night Camp. That's going to force it back on the side of Tempo. Smart play coming out from Prismat.
Wingman paying off. How much? not sure yet, but at least
Watch.
staving off some time.
Watch Kel'Thas. The answer to that was, you know, it forced 2 Qs. I'm going to say that's a victory, you know? A mild annoyance to a Kel'Thas late game. You know, it's like the fly that wouldn't get away. All right, Falling Sword's online in 4 seconds. Glaring actually dropped out of here, and he's looking for a Void combo, but he can't get Justin in that Void.
Yeah, Cawthon and Som are doing a great job of splitting thus far, and Tempo Storm secure the Giant Camp, but only Gargantuan used so far in the heroic abilities. That'll be up fairly soon, so teammate, as long as they do have that Void Prison, Falling Sword 2, Twilight Dreams, a big one as well, still have capabilities of making the fight happen. And they've caught all the way up in experience, thanks to Prismaticism's constant soaking of that top lane.
This is a lot of pressure on bottom for Tempo Storm. They should be able to secure that bottom keep, and it looks like they agree. Falstad's looking to capture up on top, so that will be a minor advantage if they can choose the fight here on bottom if you're a Team 8 fan. But this keep is going to need a desperation Void if it is going to survive. There's no way Kel'Thas does not just obliterate it. There is going to be the first Q thrown out. Justin's trying to force Prismat with the flank. There goes the Gust. Cattle's in a bad spot. The Twilight Dream only hits him. There's the 2-man Void.
Brute is good too. Cattle so far staying nice and healthy. Void Prison hits 3 in the back. The third going in. Justin is in a terrible position, has Iron Skin. Goes back up. Nice Storm Bolt to continue. Falling Sword brings Justin back in and going back in for the re-engage.
And actually just giving something for Fury to be able to heal off. Glaring with good jukes there. Zombie Wall is going to choke out Fury, but self-sustain there with his Talon build. And just being the Murden, you know. This is going to be Team 8 being able to heal up. Tempo Storm's taking a risk. They go up there, good blind. Odin's drop now. Klarang on the backline. Cattle's low, and actually because this fight happened so close to the base, members of Team 8 backed and now re-enter the fight, which is why Tempo Storm is now losing it.
Glaurung looking for the money flank that can get the team fight in his favor. Cattle still trying to run out with that low mana, low health, but ever so slowly getting healed back up by June. Tempo is willing to re-engage into this despite being low on health and low on mana, and it might be to their doom.
Oh.
Fury jumps out.
That was a beautiful peel there. The minute that Seeker ended up hitting Psalm, I thought for sure Glaurung would be able to rip through his HP, but the Storm Ball coming out from Fury, quick flights from Prismat, all started by what we were talking about, capturing that shrine up on top and then fighting near the bottom shrine increases your odds of a Dragon Knight insanely. So this is a Dragon Knight achieved for Team 8 by a greedy attempt to get that keep on the side of Tempo Storm. They could have gotten it if they all in, but they just constantly slow rotated and let Team 8 move out onto them, get the dismount, which is not what you want in this case. Cattle's looking for a flank now. Void's up. Just off cooldown, Odin's down, the only heroic not available after 2-man gravity lapse, but no DPS going to be put out. Glaurung is getting sniffed out there by Fury. Set him down to 50% HP thanks to that Phoenix.
Yeah, once again, this is Falstad inside the Dragon Knight, so Tempo Storm understood that there was no Gust unless Team 8 were willing to drop the DK, protecting their fort still. Dwarf stops the inevitable punt from Dragon Knight, pulls him forward a little bit further.
Such a weird interaction to see that. We're yet to see the Falling Sword in action. It makes me a little bit sad, you know, to see it move up and try and get the drop. Ooh, Cattle not able to hit that Howling Blast. If he had taken the level 1 and had enough stacks, maybe. But for the solo, it looks like most of the time Rhyme is the option. They want this bottom keep. Good flank, Howling Blast. Pre-cleanse from Buds is going to save
Prismat. So many pings on Prismat. He'd already used barrel roll. He is on out of there. Glaurung once again sets up for the flank. Falling Sword available to follow up if needed. Another Flame Strike. Finally takes the life of the keep.
Void wasn't forced, but there's an experience advantage here for Team 8. They have the opportunity to win the race to 20 and maybe look for a major play, but without the shrine spawning in that amount of time, there's no reason you can expect Tempo Storm to split up and try and make those big plays, thrive on this map.
No, instead, Tempo are A-okay with getting their bruisers, their giants, trying to make sure that they have presence in the lanes. Twice now, Team 8, just by having a global, have been able to take a Dragon Knight, but with a keep down, it's getting juicier and juicier for Tempo Storm to be able to get a Dragon Knight of their own.
I like the patience there of Prismat, looking for that side soak but not revealing. He gets to pick up a little bit more information than he maybe would have otherwise, and then sits back at the fort. Doing his job here on Dragonshire. That is what you need to be doing if you are the global.
That is a monster wave mint. Tempo. Along with the pressure of these towers, people are about to get stormed here.
If they get that turret, it will. But I don't think they're gonna. Oh, they did. Never mind. I thought Boomerang would be up faster. And I miscalculated. Feels bad.
There's Vile Infection for Nazebo. Epic Mount, Falstad 2.
Anti-armor for Arthas. Already fallen pretty low here. All right, so once again, the global post-20 happening here on Dragonshire, which means Falstad is pretty much... Tempo Storm has to take a fight onto a shrine they don't control, which is right now going to be bottom. They just don't get to really dictate the area of fighting. And they're going to try and get onto Buds here. Howling Blast is going to be ice blocked, held on that very late considering it gave some gap closer for Cattle, but those spiders ripping through. Flight comes in for Prismac, gets the bribe. And this is going to be a fight on the shrine. If won, it's teammate getting a free Dragonite. If not, Tempo has to make a long rotation if they're going to have a chance.
And that means looking for a lot of kills here. Yoda would be a nice juicy one. Stormbolt connects. Cleanse gets him out. Ice block even used.
June is just having a hard time keeping up through this late game Nazebo damage, which we saw a singular Q hitting Cawthon, brought him down to 50% HP there. Not having that Neo Steel coating, going with, you know, the in the rhythm to be able to negate some of that magic damage here.
Claw's going in.
Cattle.
Cattle's there.
He's got the flank. Rewind used by Glaurung. Stormbolt lands on a Prismat. Fury going in, getting him half HP.
He's getting low.
Will Prismat make the risky flight and give up the fight? Looks like they're not going to. Cattle turns in. There goes the Void. Will we get the Falling Sword?
Falling Sword's on top. Hits 3, knocks him up. Twilight Dream 2 spells the end of Arthas.
And that is going to be a full retreat. Tempo Storm, the flight, the gust, not letting them go anywhere. No mercy here. Team 8, the Ancestral does land. Prismat almost goes down to Cawthon here. So yes, the gust happened.
But it kind of cost Glaurung his life.
Died?
One more. There was 2. It's 2 for 1 still in favor of Team 8.
Prismat, it can flight, so this is going to be a Dragonite for Prismaticism. I thought there was no way. Like, June had a legendary Ancestral, but I thought for sure that was the only target that would stand a chance to be able to survive that. Wow. Team 8 here will be able to threaten a keep. With Kael'thas down for 30 seconds, they will make a lot happen.
And making sure to maximize the damage. Every little amount by getting Giants in the bottom. This is level 21 Nazebo. Ready for action. Ready to siege.
The best focus for Tempo is going to be, all right, so teammate's going to move in, look for this keep, then back out through mid, take out the mid fort, and then when they move up to that keep front wall, that's where they really want to try and capitalize on the mispositioning of Team 8. It is possible if teammate suicides this, which they did because Glaurung's back at base. Wow. That should have been a free keep, but no longer is going to be the case again because Glaurung actually rotated out. I don't know if Tempo Storm knows this, but they don't care because they have done so much damage to the Dragonite. This is things falling apart for Team 8 very quickly here in the late game, even with that beautiful Wombo.
Glaurung will step back in. Team 8 do not want to give up this keep. They don't want to give up mitigating this catapult pressure that Tempo Storm has had. Fury steps in.
Steps in, quickly steps out. Nazebo and that poison. So much damage. Fury the Sunwell, good gravity lapse. Gets a little bit of damage onto Yoda, but again, one of the highest health pools on a ranged assassin. Buds, that is Fury the Sunwell. Damage forces the bolt.
He's gonna bolt out. Cattle's still on top of Yoda. He has the ice block. That's going to be a Stormbolt too.
A Void onto 1 is not a good Void in this situation. Cattle taking the damage. Ancestral will land. June there to back him up. Justing.
Indestructible.
But it does cost him his life. There's no way he gets out here with Cattle. Unless
Surprise!
he Falling Swords out.
We forgot. Falling Sword plus Gust equals teammate staying alive a little bit longer.
I'm going to die. I'm sorry. Oh, man. When I laugh that hard, the sickness comes back. Jesus.
It's anti-fun sickness, actually.
Yeah, it turns out you're allergic to enjoying yourself. Sorry. Okay, so now things are still fine for both teams. Tempo Storm with a slight advantage in the sense they have the only keep in the game. Team 8 with the advantage in the sense that they've got a global on Dragonshire. And they've been doing pretty well in these fights, you know, when the Wombo combo Falling Sword really works out.
Yeah.
Psalm doesn't have very many tools to retreat.
I will also say this might be the best case for Wingman I've ever seen. Prismatis isn't using those to full effect. He's been running the global all over the place.
When they don't need the damage, you know, it has paid off. Falling Sword made up for the lack of Seasoned Marksman. That's it, you know? No, not really, but...
Falling Sword made up for an escape at this point. That's mostly been what it's about.
We've had one set up
that
it
was
felt good.
Beautiful.
All right, so nobody knows that Tempo Storm is here. They see Glorong. Drop the ping. Again, every time a Dragon Knight phase rotates up, because Team A has the global, they have the advantage. They force Tempo Storm to fight on a side of the map that they don't want to, which in fact is going to be bottom once more. Tempo enjoys cycling through here again because they have that keep. If they win a fight, it's the most probable to end the game, so it makes sense that they kind of gravitate towards this bottom half of the map.
Yeah. Vision cleared out. Tempo Storm steps forward.
It's all a game of Fog of War at this point. Cattle gets it perfectly. Flanks.
Buds.
Is he going to force the ice block? Gets the slow. The Void is way too far behind. Cattle's questioning if he wants to keep going forward. The root is there. A lot of damage put out.
He's used Army of the Dead, though. He's staying strong. Cleanse.
Good cleanse.
He might still be down, though. Ice blocks the Storm Bolt. Mighty Gust 2, Falling Sword. Here comes Justing.
Cattle is there, or Cawthon, excuse me, on his own, doing fine. Glorong just buying a little bit of attention as Yoda just throwing out all the spells, but the Storm Bolt does end up landing. Will it cost him his life? It does.
There was nothing else left to save him. Now Buds is in trouble too, and Sesco keeps Cattle alive in the nick of time. Malfurion is dead. Cawthon luck.
Goes with the rewind combo, but doesn't get the kill. Cawthon manages to survive. June keeping everyone up here, and with no keep up and no gust, no major defensive tools, Team 8 is going to fall here in this first game. They're desperate. They're going to try and dive.
Yeah, they understand this is so late in the game. They only have what they have left to try to get kills. There's no way anybody comes back to online. And Tempo Storm in a 25-minute game on Dragonshire clutches out the victory over Team 8.
Tempo Storm with the draft did a lot of things very right into the draft of Team 8. It was a very smart game for a large portion of it, and I love to see the pressure that Tempo Storm was trying to force onto that bottom half of the map so consistently without the map objective of. I'm finally so satisfied to see teams getting quicker and quicker on that aggression, but it did almost cost them at times.
Yeah, and Team 8 tried so hard to get that bottom keep, but not being able to do that, maybe not playing the rotations out correctly, really cost them. They would have loved to be able to open up the same way that Tempo Storm had to end the game, but man, focusing on bottom lane for Tempo Storm there in that last fight, pushing forward, constant flanks from Caterpillar too. Excellent job in the end. I
mean, if you go back and rewatch that, Justin was anchoring that shrub for a very long period of time, and Cattle was like just at max range out of Fog of War. The minute he left, Cattle instantly rotated.
Yeah.
I don't know if Cattle actually saw Justin leave or if it was just the luckiest timing of ever. It was just like, you know, the Nexus God's blessing Cattle in his rotation. But either way, it was very well done, very smart rotations. And it allows Tempo Storm to at least win game number 1.
Tempo Storm does win game number 1, but we've got a full best-of-5 series still available for Team 8 to come back. We're headed to a commercial. We'll see you after.
You know, I've been in more scrapes and adventures than I can count. That being said, I've never seen anything like this.
Hail, hero.
Is that a frog in a bubble? Oh gosh, they are so cute. Well then, there's so many friendly people here. Coming through. Love the hair.
Oh, the cavalry's here.